What's up guys, it's Brad from JBH Media here. Today I'm going to be going over this little visual effects test that I created in order to try and replicate some of the effects in the new Ghost in the Shell movie that was just released a few months ago. It's kind of this cyberpunk style street reality where it's grungy and futuristic at the same time. So I'll just be going over how I created this little visual effects test inside of Blender and After Effects from start to finish. So yeah, let's get started here. Here's the final shot with the grain LUT applied to it. As you can see, we have the characteristics of kind of some like cyberpunk type reality where it's very grungy but also futuristic with the neon signs and new street lights as well. We have some interesting neon everywhere along with some kind of derelict and grungy background here. I'll show you the original shot here. If I went to a street under a bridge in Los Angeles at night and I took this photo on a nice wide angle lens with the idea that I would replace the background. But yeah, this is the original shot, and I'll be going over from start to finish how I created the final version. The first thing I wanted to do was build kind of a subway system in the foreground here. One of the things that's a little bit more important to match when your objects are in the foreground is the perspective of those objects. So this is one of the reasons that I decided to create the foreground and the subway station inside of a 3D program so that I could get all the lighting and materials to look a little bit more accurate to the original environment, the original shot here. Going inside of Blender here, this is the scene that I modeled. So the first thing I did was I created these 3 street lamps, and those are kind of supposed to be illuminating this street along with a street lamp over here that's lighting everything as well. Wanted to try something a little bit more futuristic for the lighting. The next step I did was I created actually the subway station itself. It's just kind of some stairs that go into the ground, and then I created a little barrier around it. In addition to that, I've also recreated all the floor. I wanted it to look a little bit more grungy than the original shot, so I created kind of a concrete texture with a little bit of specularity to get the glimmer off of the neon background a little bit more. So I've done that. I've added some specularity to most of the materials as well. I tried to make these railings, as you can see here, a little bit more specular as well. But yeah, this is kind of the general scene that I modeled inside of 3D. Fairly basic, just kind of a hole in the ground, some stairs going down, some striped texture here, neon signs here with a concrete background. These posts are kind of a rusted metal type texture. Then I've also created this kind of shipping container that also has a rusty texture on it as well. But yeah, then I also created this store in the foreground. I kind of wanted to create some neon signs in the foreground as well as the background to make sure the foreground and the background blended together a little bit better. So I've created this text inside of Blender, and then I made them an emission material, which means they emit light, which also interacts with the scene. Environmental interaction is a key to selling the shot a little bit better. So I've created this scene inside of Blender, and I've also projected the buildings from the original shot onto the background so that they're actually reflecting onto the scene here to make that lighting and the reflections a little bit more realistic. In addition to that, I've also added some more lights here. As you can see, there's a light over here that I've created inside of the 3D program that emits kind of a yellow kind of backlighting all this area here. I've just created these 2 lights that kind of backlight the interior portion that is 3D here. And one of the things we talk about in cinematography is extending sources, extending the light, and making it feel motivated. And because I had the street lamp in the original shot that's behind this building here, I'm able to kind of cheat the way that I light the rest of the scene inside of 3D. I can create my own little sources that are the same color temperature as that street light and extend that light under this bridge here. So this is the general idea of the 3D program. Fairly basic scene. I've also added a little particle system to create these pieces of paper on the ground to add a little bit more to the grunge of the environment. But yeah, I rendered that out with an alpha channel here in the background and then overlaid that onto the original scene as my first step to the process. So here we are inside of After Effects, and the first step I did, as I said before, is I overlaid that 3D render that I just created onto the scene. So as you can see here, now that you can actually see the render, I've created some lights here with an emission material inside of Blender that also help to illuminate the interior of the subway. And I've also created these kind of reflectors to add a little bit of accenting light in different areas. But the first thing I wanted to do after I added the 3D layer is make it a little bit more grungy of an environment. So I started with the background, and I wanted to just grunge up this entire building here. So I just started adding different layers of grunge. And just bringing that all in here. And it's just graffiti. It's just a simple graffiti layer. What I've done here is I've taken different photos of graffiti off of cgtextures.com and I've overlaid them onto the scene, and then I changed the layer mode to overlay instead of normal. Normal will just overlay the image as you see it when you download it, but if you change the mode to overlay, it will actually keep what is behind it, and you're actually overlaying that as another texture that interacts with the original shot. So I've done that to all these, and kind of grunged up the background to make it feel a little bit more gritty. One thing that's important to match when you're laying on these layers of grunge in the background is the perspective of the grunge. So I've actually made these layers 3D textures, and what that means is you can actually rotate them as planes into Z space. So for example, if you're looking at this texture right here, I can actually rotate it and change the perspective. So that's pretty important when you're adding textures over something, is to make sure the perspective is matched. So for example, here's another one here. I've kind of made it a little bit diagonal in the scene because the perspective of the building is a little bit diagonal as well. So you can rotate it and it's not going to look right. You want to make sure the perspective matches. So I also wanted to grunge up the foreground here, so I've just taken some more grunge elements, added them here, some graffiti, just some more layers of detail here. And one of the things that helps sell a little bit more realistic of a shot is little idiosyncrasies in your 3D objects. I knew inside of Blender I didn't add these layers of grunge, so I just decided to do that in the compositor and add to a little bit more realistic feel. I've also added some grunge to the signs here, just to create a little bit more detail in that light here. And I've also done it this one as well to kind of create some flaws in that object as well, to create that sense of realism. I also wanted to create a little subway door here, like a maintenance door, so I've added on this. It's just a basic picture of a door that I masked out this portion of and placed it into the scene here. And then what I've done is I've played with the color to match the environment here, along with added a drop shadow to make it feel a little bit more three-dimensional. As you can see in the background here, I added this drop shadow inside of After Effects, and even though this isn't a 3D layer, I was able to match it good enough to make it feel like it was in the scene. But yeah, the next step was to create the background of this image. So I wanted to create the background with two different elements. I wanted to create a deep background of just a city at night, and then I wanted to add specific layers of neon signs to create that cyberpunk type look. So the first thing I did was I added this deep background to just kind of a basic picture of a city here. This is the actual photo itself, but because I scaled it up and I put it so far in the background, I've just used kind of little pieces of these lights in the background to create another layer of depth. Once I did this, I wanted to embellish it with neon signs and some more unique elements. I've also added some more buildings. I wanted to create a little bit more light in the background, some kind of accents to the scene. And then I've added some neon signs here. This is actually from the same picture. I've just masked out a certain portion of it so I could edit just this, and I've manipulated that in 3D space inside of After Effects to match the environment a little bit better. And I've also added to all my neon signs a little glow element, as you can see there, to help bring it to life. I've also added another deep background here. There's some empty space here, so I wanted to kind of fill that in. But yeah, I just kind of added different layers of neon signs, created this another neon sign, and again I'm doing these inside of the 3D workspace, so you can actually change the perspective of these as you like. So I just kept adding more and more signs. This one is here. I've added this sign kind of to the top of the building here. Again, I've added a glow to that as well. Another neon sign here, again to fill in that empty space. Yet another one here on top of the buildings here. Finally, I needed to fill in this empty space here, so I took a big neon sign and placed it just behind our building in the original shot here. I added one more duplicate of that sign, a little bit smaller here in the background, to match the perspective there. And then, yeah, that's pretty much it for the background. And one of the things I noticed is that the seam between the foreground original shot and the background city was a little bit off to me. You can see the kind of the seam here doesn't really blend into the environment. So what I did is I added a little fence here to kind of make it blend into the environment a little bit more, like there was kind of a drop here before the city really began. So that was one thing I did to kind of blend those two worlds together. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I added a little adjustment layer with some grain, and then I also added a little LUT through some curves, in addition to decreasing the saturation as well. But yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. Hope this video was helpful. As always, feel free to leave a comment if you have any questions or suggestions, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. The JBH Media Facebook page is in the description below. If you want to like it there to get the latest updates, feel free to do so. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time. If you like this video, feel free to give it a share.